Katy Perry is one of the best-selling artists of all time. She's a princess of pop with 9 #1 hits. Perry is the first solo female artist to have 5 #1 singles from one album.
For most of this year, Katy Perry's headlines have been about her relationship, her tour, and her return to the spotlight after a rocky album cycle. That changed within the span of a single week in April, when a lighthearted post about Coachella turned into a formal police investigation in Australia. What began as a joke about Justin Bieber's headline set spiraled into one of the most serious controversies of Perry's career, and it is still unfolding, which is exactly what makes it worth slowing down and looking at carefully, piece by piece, rather than reacting to whatever headline happens to be trending in a given hour. The chain of events started innocently enough. The entertainment outlet Complex shared a post about Perry's reaction to Justin Bieber's first Coachella headlining performance, where he had woven in old footage of himself as a teenager. Perry, who attended the festival with her boyfriend, former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, made a quick and fairly typical joke online about being glad Bieber had an ad-free version of YouTube. It was the kind of comment that usually disappears within a day. Instead, it drew a reply from actress Ruby Rose, best known for roles in Orange is the New Black and Batwoman, that had nothing to do with Bieber or Coachella at all. Rose used the moment to accuse Perry of sexually assaulting her years earlier at a Melbourne nightclub called Spice Market, writing bluntly that she did not care what Perry thought of anything. That first post opened the door to a much longer and more detailed account. Rose said the alleged incident took place when she was in her early 20s, she is now 40, and said it had taken almost 2 decades to feel able to talk about it publicly. In follow-up posts on Threads, she gave a specific and graphic description of what she says happened that night, including that Perry approached her while she was trying to avoid her, and that the encounter ended with Rose becoming physically sick. She said she still had photographs and that there were witnesses, since the incident allegedly happened in a crowded public venue rather than somewhere private. She also directly challenged Perry to sue her over the claims, saying she did not expect that to happen because, in her words, the event had actually occurred. Perry's team did not wait long to respond. Within about a day, a representative issued a statement to multiple outlets, including Variety and ABC News, describing Rose's allegations as categorically false and calling them dangerous, reckless lies. The statement went further, adding that Rose had what it called a well-documented history of making serious public accusations against various people, claims that it said had repeatedly been denied by those named. It was a firm and pointed denial, the kind that leaves no real room for ambiguity, and it set the tone for how Perry's camp would handle the story going forward, through short, carefully worded statements rather than any personal commentary from Perry herself. Then the story moved out of the realm of social media entirely. Victoria Police confirmed to multiple news organizations, including CNN, NBC News, and ABC News, that detectives from the Melbourne Sexual Offences and Child Abuse Investigation Team, known as SAUCIT, were investigating what they described as a historical sexual assault that occurred in Melbourne in 2010, allegedly at a licensed venue in the city's central business district. Police said the investigation was ongoing and that they would not comment further while it continued, which is standard practice in cases like this but also means that, for now, very little about the actual evidence is publicly known. Rose herself said she had initially not wanted to file a police report, but she changed her position within a couple of days, telling followers that she had walked into a police station to see whether her experience could be formally investigated. By that Tuesday, she said she had finalized her reports and would no longer be able to comment publicly on the matter, describing the requirement as, in a way, a relief that let her begin to move forward. It is also worth understanding why Perry's statement was worded the way it was, because the choice of language matters more in this kind of dispute than it might in an ordinary celebrity spat. Calling allegations categorically false and describing them as dangerous, reckless lies is a much stronger and more legally loaded response than a simple denial would be, and it lines up with how defamation law tends to work in Australia, where several high-profile figures have pursued legal action in recent years. Unlike in the United States, where public figures generally have to prove that a false statement was made with actual malice, meaning the person either knew it was false or showed reckless disregard for the truth, Australian defamation law places more of the burden on the person who made the allegedly false statement to prove that what they said was substantially true. That difference has made Australian courts a more common venue for defamation cases involving public figures. Performers such as Rebel Wilson and Geoffrey Rush have both pursued and won cases there in the past. None of this means Perry's team has announced any legal action, and as of now no lawsuit connected to Rose's claims has been filed or confirmed by either side. It simply provides useful context for why a statement from a celebrity's representative might be worded with unusual precision rather than left as a vague, generic denial. One day after that statement was released, Perry posted to her own Instagram story for the first time since the allegations became public, but she did not address them directly. Instead, she shared the cover art for her 2013 song By the Grace of God, adding only the words I love you without further explanation. She did not mention Rose, the investigation, or the controversy at all. Fans quickly noted that a line from that song references truth eventually coming to light, and the post was interpreted in a number of different ways online, from a general message of faith to a more pointed response aimed at the unfolding situation. Because Perry has not otherwise spoken personally about any of this, that single, ambiguous post remains one of the few pieces of public communication that can be attributed to her directly rather than to a representative speaking on her behalf. The location where the alleged incident took place adds its own complications to the story. Spice Market opened in Melbourne in 2009, built to resemble a Moroccan-style courtyard with room for around 600 guests and a private VIP area known as the Genie Bottle. In August 2010, Perry was in Australia promoting her single California Girls ahead of the release of her album Teenage Dream, and earlier that same night she had drawn attention for crashing a high school formal at a nearby hotel, a moment that was filmed and widely circulated at the time. A former manager of the club later told the Herald Sun, and the account was picked up by several outlets, that Perry and Rose arrived together that night along with a couple of other people, and that staff eventually arranged for the two women to be quietly escorted out through a back exit because of concerns about photographs. He described the environment as chaotic given the size of the crowd, said the group had been drinking but was not out of control, and said he was not personally aware of any misconduct or of anyone being sick that night. That account does not confirm or contradict Rose's version of events, it simply reflects what one staff member says he observed. Notably, Spice Market permanently closed at the start of this year, several months before the allegations became public, meaning any records or security footage from the venue, which nightclubs in Australia typically only retain for about a month at the time, are almost certainly long gone. Adding another layer to the story, a column Rose wrote for news.com.au back in 2011 has resurfaced online. In it, she described a heavy night of drinking in Melbourne that ended with her being sick on Perry, framing it as an embarrassing personal low point that ultimately pushed her to stop drinking for good. The tone of that piece was very different from her recent allegations. At the time, she wrote that nothing serious had happened beyond the embarrassment of the night itself. The resurfacing of that column does not prove or disprove anything about the current allegations, but it has become part of the public conversation because it shows the same night being described in strikingly different terms more than a decade apart, which is the kind of detail that tends to get seized on by both supporters and critics in a story like this. Rose's allegations were not the only ones to resurface. Josh Kloss, who played Perry's love interest in her 2010 Teenage Dream music video, gave a new interview to Page Six in late April describing what he called years of silent trauma. Kloss said that in 2012, at a birthday party for Perry's longtime stylist, Perry pulled down his pants and underwear in front of other guests as he was introducing a friend, an act he said left him shocked and humiliated even though Perry reportedly laughed it off in the moment. This was not a new claim. Kloss had first shared the story on Instagram back in August 2019, and at the time he faced pushback from people close to Perry, including her stylist, who called the story untrue, and another friend who described Kloss as an obsessed fan. Kloss said he came forward again now, more openly, because seeing Rose's allegations make headlines made him feel it was important to speak up rather than stay quiet, and he has said his goal was never to punish Perry but to finally say something that had been sitting with him for years. Perry has not addressed Kloss's specific claims directly. The closest she has come was a 2020 interview with The Guardian in which she spoke broadly about how public accusations can spread quickly, said that people can say anything about her, and explained that she generally chooses not to respond to individual claims in detail. It is worth being careful here about a few other things that have circulated online since the story broke. Screenshots claiming to show additional women describing uncomfortable encounters with Perry have been shared widely on platforms like Threads and X, but none of those additional claims have been independently verified or confirmed by major news organizations covering the story, and they should be treated as unconfirmed rather than as established fact. In a fast-moving situation like this one, it is easy for speculation, old clips, and second-hand claims to blend together with verified reporting, and that blending is part of what makes stories like this so difficult to follow responsibly. What can be stated with confidence, based on reporting from CNN, NBC News, ABC News, and Variety, comes down to a short list. Ruby Rose has made a detailed public allegation against Katy Perry. Perry has firmly and repeatedly denied it through her representatives. Josh Kloss has separately alleged a different incident from 2012. And Victoria police have confirmed that a formal investigation into a historical sexual assault allegation is underway, with no findings yet made public. All of this is landing during an already difficult stretch for Perry. Her 2024 album 143 was met with some of the weakest reviews of her career, and her decision to work with producer Dr. Luke drew criticism given his past legal history with Kesha. Her April trip aboard a Blue Origin flight generated weeks of online mockery rather than the positive attention she may have hoped for. She and actor Orlando Bloom ended their long relationship last year after nearly a decade together, and her subsequent relationship with Justin Trudeau has kept her in the headlines for reasons unrelated to her music. Her Lifetime's tour has been a genuine commercial success, reportedly bringing in well over $100 million, but that success has not been enough to fully offset the run of negative press surrounding her personal life and public image. None of that context proves anything about the truth of the current allegations one way or the other, but it does help explain why this particular controversy has landed with such force and spread so quickly. For now, both women have gone largely quiet on the substance of the matter. Perry has not spoken personally about the allegations beyond her representative statement, choosing instead to let her team handle the public response while she continues performing on tour. Rose has said she is no longer able to comment publicly because of the ongoing police process. That leaves the public in an uncomfortable position, intensely interested in a story that, for legal reasons, its two central figures are no longer able to discuss in detail. What happens next will depend far less on what trends online than on what investigators in Melbourne are able to establish, and on whatever legal steps, if any, follow once that investigation concludes. Until then, the most responsible thing anyone covering this story can do is keep clear the line between what has actually been confirmed by police and reporters, and what remains speculation, however compelling that speculation might be to read. It is also worth remembering how ordinary this story looked before it became something else entirely. A joke about ad-free YouTube, replied to by a celebrity gossip account, is about as low stakes as social media content gets. That it turned, within a matter of days, into a police investigation on the other side of the world says something about how quickly online moments can pull decade-old history back into the present. Whatever the investigation ultimately finds, the pattern itself is worth noticing. A single reply, made in a moment of irritation or catharsis, was enough to reopen a chapter that had otherwise stayed private for 16 years. That is not a judgment on whether Rose's account is accurate or whether Perry's denial is sincere. It is simply an observation about how these situations tend to unfold in an era when a public figure's past is always one screenshot away from resurfacing. For anyone trying to follow this responsibly, the safest approach is to separate three distinct threads that are easy to blur together. The first is the criminal investigation itself, which is being handled by Victoria Police and will move on its own timeline, largely out of public view, guided by evidence rather than public opinion. The second is the court of public opinion, where reactions, old clips, and resurfaced claims move far faster than any formal process ever could, and where certainty is often expressed long before any of the underlying facts have actually been established. The third is the broader pattern of allegations that have followed Perry over the years, from Kloss's account to older, less detailed claims raised by other individuals, which deserve to be considered on their own terms rather than treated as automatic proof of anything happening in the current case. Keeping those three threads apart is difficult in the middle of a fast-moving news cycle, but it is the only way to actually understand where this story stands right now, rather than where the loudest voices online insist it must be heading.